Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Thank you for joining. Today's session is the HPMA Awards for the Meet the Finalists for the HR Analytics category. My name is Ahmed Shahrabani. I'm a practicing acute medicine clinician and co-founder of Locum's Nest. Locum's Nest, effectively, we see ourselves as the NHS's collaborative bank technology partner. So a couple of housekeeping rules before we get started with the candidates. If I could ask everybody to ensure that your cameras are switched off and your audio is off at all times, just try and kind of minimize any background noise. Any questions you have for any of the speakers, please put through the chat function and I will try my best to kind of keep memory of them and ask them once the speakers have finished. The webinar is being recorded. I hope that's okay with everybody. And it goes without saying, please follow the gang at the Twitter conversation at HPMA Awards, and yeah, we'll get going. So this award, really, at a personal level, we decided to go ahead with this as data is so powerful, so useful, and it's probably fair to say extremely underutilized across the NHS and many other public and private sectors, and we're looking out for key innovators who've harnessed the data in the right way, in a sustainable way, and used it for good to benefit patient care ultimately, but also healthcare worker well-being, efficiency processes, saving them money, etc., etc. So really looking forward to hearing what the three trusts have to say. I'll go straight into it and welcome you to the first speaker. The first speaker is Caroline Durdle, who is Head of Strategic Workforce Development at Stockport NHS Foundation Trust. The project is HR Analytics, the way forward, and we're hoping to hear about how they implemented an advanced HR analytics program called Cutting Through the Noise, focusing on the attention on key areas to enable action, showing huge impact on management, workforce, and patient care. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Caroline.
Hello, and thank you for that. Hopefully I have now shared my screen so that you can see my slides. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I'm delighted that Stockport has been shortlisted as one of the finalists for the Locum's Nest category. We started to introduce an electronic system for analysing our workforce data because we were facing significant challenges triangulating various data sets and them being produced by different people from different systems for different reasons. Things were cut differently, so it resulted in different sets of figures that were supposedly telling the same story. And the other thing was that it resulted in actions happening due to gut feeling and the noise that was being made rather than it being evidenced. So what we wanted to do was to be able to forecast based on what was actually happening in as real time as possible. So we did previously do look back analysis, but this was also in siloed areas and it required a lot of manual intervention. So we wanted this to be automated so that operational managers could understand their own trends as they emerged and could do their own looking for those trends as well. So this slide represents how our reports looked. It was all on paper. They were all in separate documents, in separate folders, in separate drives. The raw data was only available to a select few. So there was quite a lot of report writing going on and pulling data from the different sources. And mainly the systems didn't talk to each other. So our finance system didn't talk to ESR, and our occupational health system didn't talk to the other systems. So it was about bringing it all together. This made it impossible for the operational managers to triangulate their data and obtain that meaningful information relating to critical workforce issues. And as you can see, everything was a sea of red, green and amber. So an example of where we were sort of trying to understand trends as they emerged was around our key workforce parameters such as sickness absence, and due to the limitations of ESR we were unable to categorise the absence data, and it was difficult to complement it with other data sources without carrying out extensive integration of the data. So we wanted to ensure that we had a programme that was beneficial not only to senior leadership team, but also to the operational team, and allowing them to obtain data and insights for themselves without any delay, and ensuring that the reports that they received contained the one single version of truth. So our implementation, so we have been working with HR and people analytics solidly for probably 18 months, but over the last 12 months, we've really pushed it forward. And our implementation and development programme was helped to iron out any potential issues that we had before they occurred, and to make sure that all voices were heard during the process. It was essential that we ensured we overcome any barriers in collecting and analysing the data using this new programme. So we started our journey by using the data that was already shared. This gave us a quick win from a point of view that managers already recognised it, and it boosted the overall analytics programme development throughout the implementation. A key aim was to ensure that all our systems and data sets talk to each other. This has provided fantastic advances in identifying trends and making actionable decisions to support our workforce and to have positive impacts on patients, rather than rather than taking actions based on gut feeling. So we moved through the development plan as it's shown on that chart, and as part of this, we focused on collaboration across HR, recruitment, learning development, finance and operations areas. This was essential to ensure that the needs were met for a fully functioning and user-friendly analytic programme. We also focused on system thinking and delivery so that we were giving a clear user-centric approach, and it was a high priority as many of our users don't have advanced analytical skills, so it is essential to use the analytics program supporting that to support their needs and to support them to understand how to find what they need to know about what's happening within their area from a workforce point of view. It also, we enhanced agility to ensure effectiveness and that we had that information flow with the data. We optimised information through the programme so that we focused on how information could lead to effective data-driven decisions. And mostly, we've created independence for operational managers around HR, stats, and doing that analytic part of it. So this is now what we have. We have a fully electronic integrated system with a key feature that enables users to drill down into all the charts to get very specific information depending on what they're looking for. The successful deployment of the HR analytics programme has resulted in us consolidating various data sources. We've automated all our board reports and they are produced 10% earlier now. Also, with the automation of the reports, we have done a bit for saving a few trees. We've reduced the reporting pressures on our internal teams for those ad hoc reports, and we're able to triangulate the workforce and finance information. This has all given greater visibility, which enables the managers to get the most impactful information and start those conversations to decide on outcomes quickly and actions that they can take. It's cut through the noise of people saying, oh, well, we're okay, everything's all right. Actually, we've got the data now that shows if that's true or not, or also, well, our biggest problem with it is with an X staff group. And actually, when we look at the data in the more detail, we find that that isn't necessarily the truth. So it gives us a chance, the operational managers, to, sorry, I've slipped on slides. It gives the operational managers the opportunity to act quickly and rather than searching for data. We've now got over 200 operational managers who are interacting with their own data. And as I've just said, the approach has reduced the demand across the trust for HR to provide ad hoc reports. And it's harnessing a new and exciting data sources to support a multi-source data for the delivery of business intelligence for our operational users. So the journey continues. Whilst this isn't a project any longer and it's classed as business as usual, it is still evolving and we're continually developing it. The HR team are the champions of the system, and we're all providing continual support as it's needed for our operational managers. If someone asks us, how can I do this? We do it with them. We filter down and we drill down into the charts so that next time they don't need to ask us and they can do it themselves, and they're producing their own reports from these looking at the datas. Many of the comments that we've had when we've introduced the system and done training sessions with various operational managers start with wow, because they're just getting their heads around actually being able to see the data for themselves rather than being given just a chart that they can't look into and find out what the background is. Since our initial plan, we've added ED and I and created an interactive dashboard with that information. We've added in recruitment data, and that will be available from September for the operational users. We're also developing our mission control part of the site, which will produce high-level overviews in a glance for the execs and senior managers of the key performance indicators, rather than them having to look at lots and lots of charts and drill down on it. We're also working with occupational health so that we can develop a health and wellbeing dashboard. This is something that we've got the information, but it's not widely shared across the trust. So that will be a great input for operational areas to see how their teams are being supported. And by providing that continual support and development and listening and acting quickly on what people are asking us, we are ensuring that HR analytics will be sustainable within the trust and is here to stay and carry on developing. I'm getting to be that annoying person who sees a graph or a set of figures and starts to ask, how do we get that into HR analytics so that the data is accessible to all? And I think it's really important that to be useful, data can't be secret. It does need to be shared, and that's what this system's doing for us. So just looking at sort of our successes, we've had an excellent working relationship with the programme provider, and by using the HR analytics programme, the trust has been able to empower our operational managers to create actionable insights with their own data, and thus creating ownership for what needs to be done. Data's no longer overwhelmingly everywhere, and we've cut through that noise of people saying, well, this is why things are happening. We now have the evidence to say, actually, this is what the background is, and it enables actions. And it's ultimately showing that huge impact on our managers and workforce and how we provide our patient care. So just sort of finally, if you were thinking of going down this route and this project, put a number of sort of tips there, and just to highlight a couple from a point of view of the first one being, and I don't want to upset any of our exec colleagues that might be hearing this, but whilst exec sponsorship is important due to the nature of the system and its operational uses, we needed the operational champions and they were essential. And it was also essential for our HR team to be systems experts to support those operational managers. If you, another bit of learning for us is if you decide on to do a pilot, if you're going forward with this, is for you to choose well and go to the area that you know will really use it. Again, don't just go to the area that says they'll use it. Maybe use some past evidence as to whether they have worked with new systems previously. We actually possibly picked our pilot area incorrectly, and we're getting better uptake now. We've moved wider in the trust. I think the other bit that sums up the other tips is really to set expectations and keep things in a bite size as you increase the data sets. And a biggie for us was we worked with this system for probably 6 months out of the 18 months, and we kept producing our old reports. So that first slide, we put a date where we decided that we would turn those reports off, and we stuck to it. And I would say don't be afraid to do that, because this was when the operational users actually started to use the system and we started to be able to build it with them. So that would be my top tips around those. So thank you very much for listening. And are there any questions?
Great. No, Caroline, thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your top tips too. They're very insightful and very honest and transparent. So I really like how you focused this piece of hard work for the end users. So actually it was used in kind of day-to-day operational decision making, rather than just a kind of tick box high level creating a data set for the sake of it. So no, amazing work. Couple of questions from here, some that have been sent through and some from previously. You mentioned that the data were in silos initially. Not so much interested in the technical bits for now, but how did you get past any cultural issues, or did you have any resistance between teams simply not wanting to share? For example, finance not wanting to share with HR, or vice versa, or whatever. Did you face any of that? And if so, how did you circumnavigate it?
I think we were very lucky. We worked very closely with our finance colleagues and obviously on our learning department as well. So the initial project was sponsored both by our Deputy of Workforce and our Deputy Finance Director as well. So we had that buy-in from the start, which was really, helpful and has been able to drive the project forward. I think the other bit goes back to actually using, so we built the system firstly around our big board report that we did. So we used the same data that people were used to seeing in there. So from an end user point of view, it wasn't a lot of new information, and we're starting to pull that in now as part of our continual development as people are getting used to the system. So I think that from a cultural point of view, helped us tremendously that we had that buy-in between workforce and finance straight away. The big issue is getting away from the paper and the reliance that managers have had on that, and that has, I'm not going to lie, that hasn't been the easiest thing in the world, but it's case of sticking to your guns and actually showing what the system can do that is more than a paper report with just a set of red and green figures on it.
No, perfect, totally. There's nothing like a hard deadline which isn't movable. Slowly build change, then force it. That's great. So we've got a few questions coming, Caroline. For top one from Chloe Schaefer, really interesting, thank you. What software do you use / business intelligence tool? Are you able to share that with us?
So we actually work with a company called Liaison, and it's actually their system that we use. So it is something that we have, we're working with an external provider, so we can absolutely share their information with you, and I can, it's whether I put it in the chat box or whatever, or we can share it with the slides.
Perfect. No, thank you. Moving on a very, very similar note, is the data in real time, or is it kind of snapshots of, you're always looking at data that's a couple of days, weeks or months old?
Yeah, we are looking at last month's data all the time. So we update everything at the beginning of the month with the last month's data. So it gives time for operationally people to actually act on that. So no, it isn't real time in that we're not updating the system either weekly or daily. We update it monthly. But I think we all know with workforce analytics and workforce data, you need some time to actually put some actions in place to be able to see those results. So you're not necessarily going to see results if we were putting data in on a daily basis. So when we say real time, we are talking about just a monthly snapshot.
Got it. No, that's perfect. Thank you. And all kind of analytic systems are slightly different. Have you and the team thought about kind of using it or adapting it or doing something differently to forecast into the future? Because it's extremely useful by the sounds of things to see what's happened in the past, so you could implement new things and new processes. But is there a desire in the future to look at the future, a snapshot of actually, what's happening in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I'm smiling because we had the conversation this week myself and the contact at Liaison, from a point of view of when the mission control, which will give us that snapshot of what's happening right now, and that will be the exec team's go-to, because that will just give them a picture straight away. And as part of that, managers will also have access to it, and we're wanting to look at how we build in trajectories so that we can measure that success, or if something's dipping off. So it is part of our development plan to sort of look at that future planning as well, so that we can start seeing the impact of it dramatically, really.
No, perfect. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be extremely helpful with the pandemic and the backlog of cases. You know, analysing future trends will become invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming into winter. A couple more questions. So you've informed us that this was a kind of external third party that helped you develop this. Some people are very keen on developing those skills in-house. Have you got any recommendations of training courses or different ways of doing this? A lot of folk are probably using kind of Excel to monitor data, but is there anything you'd recommend on that front?
I'm not your tech whiz kid, but it needs to be something that's in a portal system. So I'm sure there's business intelligence teams around different organisations that could develop this, but it's about having that portal where the background information is there, but you don't have to wade through it, and actually then you've got the charts and the graphs and the end picture that can be sort of drilled down into. So not wanting to do our colleagues that have supported us with this out of anything, I'm sure it is something that could be done by business intelligence or someone that is absolutely a tech whiz kid. But I think to me, it is about having that portal rather than it being that anyone can go, that, you know, anyone can access with sort of passwords, rather than it being a series of spreadsheets that you send out. That's what we were doing before, and it just, no one was really using them. You know, they stopped at one point, and we didn't necessarily get any complaints to say where are our reports. So whereas this, we're now seeing, we can see who's using the system on a daily basis. I can get user reports through. So yeah, I think the portal element of it, if I'm using the right technology phrase, is the main bit of it. That I don't think you can do this just with a spreadsheet that's then shared across the trust.
No, totally agree. I mean, this is going to sound ludicrous coming from a co-founder of a tech company, but I've always said it's 90% the people, 10% the technology. I mean, without the people, the tech is almost useless. A few more questions, but conscious of the time. One very direct question is, how is data triangulated? Do you get HR and finance data on the same chart or report? People are keen on examples, but I'm not sure we can. We don't have time for that. But can you see HR and finance data on the same page?
Yeah. So the main view that we have, if I just go back on my, I don't know, my slide's still there. The main view that we have is a set of graphs now within there. So the finance data we have on there, vacancies and establishments. We have the NHSP usage, Locum usage, so that's on there. We have spend on as well. So yeah, you do see it together, which is really helpful.
Perfect. No, Caroline, thank you very, very much. That's 15 minutes, but thank you. That was really insightful. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for time. We may have more questions at the end of the speaker session, depending on timing. So, but no, thank you very much.
Okay, I just have to work out how to stop sharing now.
That's fine. Great. Well, whilst I do that, I will move. Thank you. That's stop sharing. Perfect. Up next, we've got a joint effort. We've got Scott Lingard, Workforce Modelling Analytics Consultant, and Lindsay Fair, Head of Strategic Workforce, Strategic Projects and Business Management at Manchester Foundation Trust and Camburg Collective. The project is Staff Absence, Availability Analytics and Forecasting during a Pandemic, using real-time high-quality absence management information to plan, manage and forecast the impact of the pandemic on staffing levels resulting in kind of swift action. Again, same format. Scott and Lindsay, if you're happy to go ahead, I'll disappear again, and yeah, I'll come back as soon as you're done. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much. Can everyone hear me, hopefully?
Yes, crystal clear and slides.
Brilliant, okay, thanks a lot. So we're here to talk to you about our submission, the HPMA submission, which is, as Ahmed said, around staff absence and availability analytics and forecasting during the pandemic. Gosh, it's hard to get your head back in that space, I think, when obviously the pandemic hit. But for us, and I'm sure for all of you, we had an absolute unprecedented staff availability challenge caused by the pandemic. So MFT has, or had at that time, 25,000 staff. We now have 28,000. And we have 10 hospitals, all with their own leadership boards, and we have a sort of group structure with a group executive team. So our total absence peaked on the 3rd of April at 14.6%, and we were averaging about 9.2% throughout the course of 2020-21. So very, very early, we very quickly recognised that our current workforce reporting processes, although they were brilliant pre-pandemic, that we needed something very different around absence to support us through the pandemic. Our data, I'd say, became very high profile very quickly, as I'm sure it probably did for you as well. So I suppose the key things we really realised were, with an organisation of our size and scale complexity, we needed real-time data, and we needed granular data to understand who was in, who was not, and when potentially they were coming back and why they weren't in. And we needed that at a group level to drive our response and support appropriately. So we rapidly assembled a task and finish group to start working on that, and the key objectives of that were really, how do we get real-time data as soon as possible? How do we, I suppose, use the data that we've got and turn that into intelligence to support our approach? And I suppose by that I mean, how do we sit it with other data? How do we start to overlay other sets of intelligence that were coming in to really then understand the implications of what we were dealing with, our decisions, operational decisions being made in the hospital. And I suppose the other part of that was around, once we've got that intelligence, how do we ensure that it is sat completely at the centre of our approach? So, you know, for us that was about getting that executive buy-in so that we had a feed of intelligence supporting our tactical groups, our strategic groups, and feeding into our hospitals at an operational level.
Great. So at MFT, we've got a system which is an absence management system called Impactus Absence Manager. Now, this is a system where staff can register their absence through a central telephone number. What that does is it gives us live, real-time information. We were actually only kind of 70% of the way through the rollout of that system when the pandemic hit. So what we did was we kind of reduced the 9-month rollout period into a couple of weeks to roll out the system as quickly as we possibly could, and also at that time worked with the suppliers to reconfigure them to introduce COVID-19 absence types. So in particular, this is asymptomatic, symptomatic, shielding, home working, categories like that, where we could get real like low-level intelligence on what was happening to our workforce, where there were patterns in demographics, patterns between hospitals, patterns between staff groups, things like that. And what we did was we developed daily reporting and dashboards that went out to managers. Now, these were, or are at the moment, still based on our like workforce information platform, which is called EWIP, where we kind of gather all of our workforce intelligence together. We are moving that information to a Power BI environment soon, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But we actually sent out those reports twice daily, so it was like a morning and afternoon refresh because the situation was that dire and difficult that that was the kind of regularity that we needed. And we also did regular forecasting, because what we started to notice was patterns in the data that would mean that some of the absence wouldn't rectify quickly. So in particular, we saw the pattern in mental health related absence increase quite early doors. And we also started noticing different patterns in shielding, as in that increasing over time and things like that. So what we quickly worked out was this wasn't going to be a flash in the pan, it was going to be around to stay. And therefore, some of our forecasting for the rest of the year really helped managers start to plan, you know, what levels of staffing they might have for the rest of the year. And the other thing we did, which was very, very powerful, was we partnered with data scientists at University of Manchester, and we handed our data over and said, tell us stuff that we're not seeing, or have a look at it and tell us if there's any patterns that we're not noticing. And that was very powerful. I guess just to give one example of that, when we were doing risk assessment profiles, BAME characteristics were at higher risk, in particular certain groups, or and actually they were able to identify that when they analysed our shielding data, that they were the least likely group of staff to be shielding as well. So we immediately found there were some issues that would inform our risk assessment processes to make sure that we're protecting our staff. And the thing we did really was we just chatted about it all the time. So we got the word out, we spoke, we did presentations trying to help people understand the forecasts, understand the different factors that impacted the staff availability, what that would mean for a typical ward. And we got out to HRBPs, HRDs, we spoke to staff side to help them understand how it might impact staff. We spoke to operational teams, we did a presentation with Greater Manchester HRDs to help them understand what might be happening in their hospitals, things like that, so we got the word out. I could give you 1,000,001 outputs and reports and things that we did, but I mean, just to give you an idea, we were able to track data and have a look at certain things. There's a couple of ones from the University of Manchester about admissions and how that might impact leave, mental health absence in the bottom right hand corner, but there were certain things like that that we did.
So in terms of, I suppose, the impact really of this, I think for us as an organisation, I suppose this was the first time really that we sort of saw the power of big data in HR decision making, and that I suppose that the data really drove our responsiveness to the pandemic. Right from that sort of lowest level of by 9 o'clock every day, there was real-time absence information that could be pulled off to support operational planning in terms of the redeployment of staff, and really, you know, enable our hospitals to work across each other to look at opportunities there. All the way through to you know, that understanding of us as for us as a HR team of why people were off. We stood up very quickly a centralised attendance management team. So when staff were calling in, we were able to call them back through the system to signpost if they were, well, signpost whichever support they needed. So we stood up day one testing very quickly. We stood up a booking service for accommodation. We stood up on-site childcare, nurseries. Obviously signposting for mental health, but giving people guidance around COVID at the time, which you know, we could give them very, very clear guidance around what to do, you know, which our managers were grappling with operational pressures. We were able to alleviate them of that kind of management responsibility for that period of time and really sort of support staff. You know, in terms of we had insight on why people were off in terms of childcare issues. We could see that well, I suppose, so in terms of childcare issues, we were able to look at our special leave policies and all of those really quickly and adapt those to deal with issues that we knew people were facing, or issue guidance about more flexibility in work, so that people could make up their hours afterwards, all of those things. We were able to see the sort of the use of annual leave, because our system captures all attendance. So we could see that we had a building annual leave issue, and again we were able to put in interventions really early around buy, sell, all of those things to manage the annual leave issues. So I think, I suppose I'd say because we had that sort of big real-time data, we were able to respond very effectively in that moment. And I suppose it was also the kind of future planning side that we really had that insight. So we were able to look at trends very quickly and start to overlay what's the implications as national policy changes. So isolation guidance dropped from 14 to 10 days. We were able to model through what does that mean for our workforce in terms of how quickly we could return people. All of those kind of, you know, that insight that you get from a really rich data set. Interestingly for us as a trust, our agency use during the pandemic actually dropped, which is amazing really. And obviously that's multifaceted as to why that happened. But I think saved us money.
Thanks, Grant. So in terms of wrapping it up in terms of future developments, so at the moment we're trying to use data warehousing and Power BI dynamically. So we have our data which is currently on our eWIP platform, which is great, but it's a little bit limited. And what data warehousing and Power BI will do is basically work with the Active Directory so that a manager will be able to log on and see information which is basically a customized dashboard for them. And it's really, really nice. It's really, really good. We're actually launching it next Thursday, and that's an image of it just below. It's just a fantastic development off the back of really the good work that we've done and investment from senior leaders saying, yes, we want to invest in this because we see the value of it. We're also keeping our relationship with the university up. It's been great to connect with them during the pandemic, but we want to carry on working with them. So any gains that we can find in an ongoing way, we can do that. And the relationship with them, they're proper geeks. We're slight geeks. They're real geeks, and incredibly useful reflections they have. We're also in Greater Manchester, we're formalising the relationships that we've built because actually we've been chatting to each other as data leads, and we're going to formalise a data leads network. And we're also going to continue to work with our suppliers to adapt systems. So that's the future for us. And in terms of key learning, I think the big thing is workforce data now has a huge platform everywhere due to the pandemic. So I think right now we've got a window of opportunity really to do some of the transformation and some of the work that maybe many of us have wanted to do for years, but we've now got the burning platform on which to do it. And I guess next, the power of doing that in team, collaborating and engaging partners and experts in that, we have found really great. The partnership with the university has been fantastic for giving credibility to our information as well. Often when we've tried to say this is what we think we should do from the data, the fact that it's been peer appraised by university has just given us credibility to be able to do that. Workforce intelligence should, along with other metrics, drive decision making and preemptive decision making. So one of the big things for us is it's not just what the data says now, but what are we predicting in the future and how are we addressing those challenges that we can see in 6 to 12 months emerging, which we're still right in the middle of. Still got a huge annual leave issue. We still think that turnover is slowly increasing, and we're watching that very closely. And I guess that feeds into the final point, which is how do we approach all the different layers of the challenges to I guess present the story about workforce availability. And that was key, telling the story to people so directors understand, department managers understand, so HRDs understand these are the likely impacts of the current metrics on the next 12 months for you, and these are the key decisions you might need to think about making in order to keep services running well and keep our patients safe. So essentially, that is it. Questions?
Great. No, Lindsay, Scott, thank you very, very much for that. On it personally, it sounds incredible. During the first wave, the GMC were incredibly helpful when I was redeployed onto the COVID wards, and it's so nice to hear about you know, again, not just the technology, but the human element that you guys helped out with helping people come back in. It was a difficult time, still is a difficult time for a lot of people. So that's an amazing story. We'll get straight into the questions. So one very interesting question is, have you been able to connect the vaccination data to see the impact that's having on absence?
Yeah, so this is really interesting because because everyone wants absence to drop, like everyone's invested in absence dropping, and that's what we want to happen. So initially, when the vaccinations programs were kind of in full swing, I think the initial ask was that we went away and found out how many more staff we would get back because of the vaccination programs. And really, it was really interesting because we went and spoke to, again, University of Manchester. We felt slightly uncomfortable with that, and we just wanted to test those assumptions. And we realised that the issue wasn't necessarily the vaccination program, but was the sensitivity to symptoms. That was actually what was driving absence, not necessarily whether or not people had COVID or not, but the sensitivity around it was, you know, I've got a cough or a cold, I need to be safe, and then the next thing you know, you've got tests and you've got other issues related to that. Or so we did model it in. Initially, when we did it, we were too ambitious. We thought the vaccination program would have a greater positive benefit than it did. So yes, we worked on that, and the reality was, after a couple of months, we realised it wasn't doing what we thought it would. So we went back to kind of re-forecast the COVID absence off the back of it. But yeah, really interesting point. That's another example of something we got wrong, but we learned through, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no disputing the impact that the vaccination programs had across the country, despite it not directly affecting kind of absences immediately. But yeah, it's so multifactorial, absence, you know, why people are on leave, etc., etc. But no, that's really interesting that you didn't see an immediate kind of correlation.
We saw some benefit, but probably not as much as if you look at the case. We tried to compare against national cases and say, does it correlate to that? And that's fraught with difficulty. But yeah, so obviously we're amazingly pleased that the vaccination program rolled out as quickly as possible, but it didn't have as greater impact on absence as we were hoping, I think, when it first happened.
Absolutely. So another question that's come in: how did you manage the data sharing setup with the other trusts in Greater Manchester? Any hurdles or issues that you faced there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think it was very much a gloves off. I think everyone just said, let's do the right thing. And that's both been in on a local level between individual organisations, and I know Caroline's been involved in that as well at Stockport, but also at a GM level, that data sharing agreements in place.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the data that we were sharing at a GM level obviously wasn't granular enough to be identifiable. So obviously that negated some issues. In terms of our relationship with the university, so we did quite a lot of work to set up honorary contracts for all the data scientists that we work with to make sure that, and we do a lot of work as a university hospital with the university, so have quite a rapid process for partnership work there and access to each other's data.
Perfect. No, thank you. Before I forget, Rachel and the team from HPMA, if all the speakers are happy, are we happy to share the presentations with everybody? I've received a few direct messages. I mean, Lindsay, Scott, are you happy? And yeah, perfect. Well, I guess we can get to that at the end if we have time. But oh yes, that's fine from Lauren. Perfect. Thank you. Lindsay, Scott, thank you very much. That was perfectly timed. Again, we might have questions for you at the end of the session, but no, thank you. I will move on if that's all right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool. So the last but not least final speaker of today is Steve Mcgowan, Director of Workforce and OD at Humber Teaching NHS Foundation Trust. The project we're going to be, or Steve's going to be talking through, is the Workforce Scorecard and Insights Report, where they introduced a people metric scorecard and insight report to have effectively one source of truth, helping the trust and department celebrate successes, allow for evidence-based decisions, which doesn't always happen, to improve performance, patient safety, and encouraging a culture of accountability and transparency by the sound of things. So, Steve, over to you. Thank you.
Ahmed, thanks very much. Just to say thanks to colleagues from Stockport and Manchester. I thought those two presentations were fascinating. And Ahmed, thanks to Locum's Nest for sponsoring this. Appreciate it. So sorry, I don't have a presentation, and I do feel a bit of a fraud, being that it's my team and my data team that have done all the hard lifting around this. But I just thought I would take you through our journey, tell you a little bit about us as a trust, why we've done what we've done. And I guess really critically, that kind of so what question about what it's achieved. And I'll share some key learning and developments in at the end that might be sort of more personal to us, but happy to do so. So just a little bit about Humber Teaching Trust. So relatively small, we've got 3,000 staff, but we're a multidisciplinary trust. So we deliver mental health services with a forensic service as well, a medium secure unit. We provide community services into North Yorkshire, and we also have a primary care provision as well. And actually the community services part of that came through a 2P transfer back into the trust a couple of years ago. So lots of staff moving in with lots of data, new to us, didn't necessarily feel part of us as a provider. So what were some of the challenges that gave were around, and some of this is very similar to what I heard from Caroline, poor data quality, so confidence in the data at a board level, confidence in that data as well. So lots of quite painful conversations sometimes about, you know, that's not right, this person isn't in there, and kind of going around that circle, and sometimes maybe losing sight of the bigger picture. We had some poor metrics, you know, even with the data, and when we got the data right, some of our metrics weren't where we needed them to be, and certainly some of our staff survey scores weren't where we wanted them to be. And I guess one of the other things that kind of led to was initiative overload. So we were going to kind of do 1,000,001 things, and we were throwing it, and a lot of it really well intentioned, but I'm not always sure as targeted and as focused as it needed to be in a relatively small trust with limited resources. So we embarked, similarly to Stockport, on, right, we're going to bring all this data together, we're going to stop what we're doing and almost kind of start again. And there was a few reasons for doing that. One is we really wanted our managers and leaders in service areas to take ownership. So this was part of an overall OD agenda around empowering managers, getting them to take that ownership, giving them the data, and be able to influence and own the decisions that they take. We could be more targeted and more evidence-based then in what we did and how we supported them as a HR service. And you know what? There's some fantastic successes that they've done at a local level and a trust level, and let's celebrate it. Let's use this as our data collection and reporting as an opportunity to celebrate that, and particularly at a board level, give that assurance that we're focusing on the right things and really valuing our staff. So we stopped all reports. We kind of said, right, we're not sending everything out. I put together a team, a management information team, and I brought the experts all into one place, and they held all of the data. And what I found, I was relatively new to the trust, was we had some really talented people who really knew this data, but maybe because of the way that we were working, we weren't getting the best out of it. So bringing all the team together, one source of the truth, one point of contact was really important for us. We then wanted to have a scorecard very similar to Stockport, where you could get, if you worked in our mental health unplanned service, you could get all of your data, be able to look at that, compare yourselves to the other parts of the trust and how they were doing, and overall in the trust, and then be able to make some decisions. So that kind of process started, and we went through some of the pain of that, some of the data quality, and maybe being too ambitious, trying to put everything in there. But through consultation with managers, understanding what our board wanted, we kind of narrowed that down, brought it all together mainly from obviously ESR and other data sources. And we got a scorecard that reported on all the things that you would expect, so turnover, sickness, all the statutory mandatory training, but also sort of a little bit deeper dive around sickness, so those kind of long-term sickness cases, those numbers of sickness that were maybe 5 and 8, which are our trigger points, and above, and also looking at some of the staff survey scores, vacancies, establishment and appraisal. So really you could look right across and see where you were as a service area and compare yourself and look at those areas and look at what the trust targets were and be able to focus. That was pulled together. That goes out on a monthly basis. So similarly on the timescales, there's a couple of weeks time lag, but you effectively get last month's data presented to you. You can see everybody else's. So that was a conscious decision that we took, because one of our learning is, do you know what, a bit of competition is good. So a bit of competition among HR business partners that are supporting areas of the business, around managers understanding where they are. We found actually that's really helped to focus and shift improvement. Importantly, we built those into our accountability reviews as well. So the accountability reviews that all of our divisional areas have with the exec team, which are on a quarterly basis, unless there's some significant issues when they've been more frequent, our scorecard's part of that. So that's looked alongside the finance information, the quality information, and we subject that to the scrutiny, and we celebrate the successes and the improvements that has been done within that. The other part of this is an insight report. So that was great at a local level, but inevitably there's a need for more detail. There was a need to get our board back into a place where they've got assurance, one on the data and one on the things that we were actually working on. So to complement this, we built up a more detailed insight report that used that data and just went a little bit further with regards to some of the reasons, with a little bit more narrative. And I think actually that did feel like, and can we have, so that built and built and built. And actually we've now got to a point, I guess 18 months later, where it's now, actually we don't need to see that, that's great, we've got that assurance, we know that you can take that bit out. So it served that purpose to get that kind of confidence in what we needed to do. We can always put stuff back in as we needed to, so that worked really well for us. So that's great, we're very happy with that, and anyone who likes kind of data, and I guess most of the people on this call can immerse themselves, and I love to immerse myself in that, but I guess there is a so what question about what we've pulled through. Now, there'll be many reasons for some of the improvements that we've had across the trust. Undoubtedly, I'd never claim them all for just this project, but what we have seen with the project is some real shifts in our metrics and our staff survey scores, and importantly, inpatient scores that our patients and service users are telling us. So just to go through a few highlights on that. So we got from 3 years ago, we've got our turnover rate from 16% down to 10%, our sickness from 5.5% down to 4.5%. Our employment relation cases have reduced by a third. And equally, we got our flu take up into the sort of just north of 75%, which was a big improvement for us. Last year, we saw every theme score in the survey go up, which we were immensely proud of, because the staff and colleagues on the call understand that, working in the conditions that people have done through the pandemic and everything that's been thrown at NHS staff, for that to come back as a positive experience, a more positive experience for them, we were delighted with. We put a lot of time and effort in, and as a result of looking at the data and areas making decisions to help, we were really pleased to see some of that come through. And again, just on I've picked a couple of bits out of our mental health inpatient survey. So we saw an increase from 51% to 66% from patients telling us about the purpose of their medicines being discussed with them. So we've managed to put 400 more people on headcount increase, and that's not to be transferred, that's just increasing our numbers as a result of more focused recruitment. Undoubtedly, that started to come through in some of the data that we saw. Again, patients telling us that they were treated with respect and dignity, up to 79% within that, and patients felt that they got the help they needed from hospital staff when organising a home situation. That went up by 17%. So not only did we see some improvements in our overall metrics, we saw some in the kind of operational areas as well. We believe that by focusing on the data and allowing us to take those evidence-based decisions, that's helped and that's contributed to that. So we're really proud of it. I just, as a bit of learning, so I scribbled a few bits down. Look, it takes some determination, I think, and I'm sure colleagues, the other two presentations will attest to this, that you know, sometimes you will get some data wrong and people will run with that and maybe make a more negative process. You've just got to fight through that. You've just got to understand why you're doing it and be really clear at the start about what the purpose is. So we were clear we wanted to improve our data, improve our scores and empower our managers, and we kept coming back to that as being a reason. I mentioned a bit of competition. Look, it's helped us anyway with regards to that. Ours is simple and cheap, so undoubtedly, you know, ours is done very much through Excel and taking that data out at the minute. We could do it, I guess, more in a more present it in a slightly different way, which would have cost more money. We weren't in that place at that time, so we've managed to get the benefits through doing this, hopefully in a relatively cheap measure, by letting our talent fly. Really, I had some really talented people in the team who took this, run with it and got it up and running, and I think that's absolutely fantastic and just shows what we've got out there. I guess my final bit is, don't disappear down a rabbit hole. We did a bit, you know, if you're not careful, you can want to report on literally everything. And there comes a point where the team quite rightly would say, Steve, can you stop asking for stuff and just keep this with what we've got there? So they will be some of my key learning. We've built this into workforce planning. We've built it into some of the budget forecasting, particularly around sickness absence rates and using that as a projected figure for what we can build in for bank and agency cover. So we're starting to use that in some of that areas. Undoubtedly, we could probably do more, and that'll be the areas that we would look to do. So that's the end of my talk stroke presentation. Apologies there was no slides. I hope that's been interesting. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Right, no, thank you very, very much, Steve. I love seeing and hearing about innovation built in-house and from scratch. And it's interesting, you very, very quickly kind of alluded to the fact that, you know, with more and more features, more and more data, more and more complexity, you've got a directly inversely proportional element with user experience and actually simplicity. And, you know, you go too far one way and then people just don't use it despite you having everything, and it turns into a bit of a mess. But one thing that I really liked listening to was you mentioned kind of you really advocated for accountability and competition, and you know that translates directly into transparency, which is good, and it is definitely the right thing to do. You know, we're big advocates of that over here, but sometimes with some organizations and some departments, it leads to some friction or resistance, and teams, you know, not wanting to go down that route, saying, okay, we may end up going down a blame game culture where, you know, people are singled out, departments are singled out. Did you have that? And if so, how did you kind of navigate around that?
I think there was a fear of that, Ahmed. I think we very much, when we do our accountability reviews, we kind of contract in to do that, and we say that it's going to be around appreciative inquiry. So we try not to get into that area. Undoubtedly, sometimes maybe, you know, that may feel more challenging for colleagues sometimes, and we do have sort of period to reflect around it. All the positives outweigh the negatives around that for me, though. I think it is, if it's done in the right way, and it is about sharing. What we have got is certain areas in our service, for example, looking across and saying, so for example, our secure unit has done some fantastic work in reducing sickness. They're sharing some of that learning into the other areas of mental health. As a result of that, they probably wouldn't have known about it if they hadn't have had access to that data and seen the improvements that they've made. So I think it's something that you have to be mindful of. The last thing we want is that people are fearful to come and talk about their performance. It should be about what offers of help do you need to shift this in the right direction, and it opens it up for that kind of conversation.
Yeah, no, totally agree. There's categorically no room for opacity in healthcare, in whatever form. So no, that's great. So we have 2 minutes to go. Steve, thank you very, very much. And thank you, Scott, Lindsay, Caroline, everyone. I found the session fascinating. I personally want to wish you good luck for the award ceremony. Hope it goes well. It's on the 7th of October. If people haven't registered but can attend, please do and book. The team at HPMA, I'm sure, will be very happy to help with the logistics of that. But yeah, with 1 minute to go, thank you again, everybody. Really appreciate it, and best of luck to the projects. Thank you.